We hope you enjoy today's message on Acts chapter 2 verse 38 preaching channel. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit the bell to help us grow.
And so tonight, as he mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the last things, the end time, what theologians call eschatology. The eschaton is the Greek for last things, and so eschatology is the study of the last things. So at least maybe you learned something here tonight. Eschatology, a big word that simply means the last things. But of course, this subject is of great interest to many people. Those who believe the Bible is the Word of God, you find many things about the end time. And the modern Pentecostal movement, which exploded starting in 1901, was motivated to a great extent by a belief the Lord is coming back and God is preparing His people. He's pouring out His Spirit. And the early Pentecostals of the 20th century, they saw in Acts chapter 2 where the Apostle Peter took the prophecy of Joel and preached it. It said, "In the last days, says God, I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh." And these 20th century believers said, well, if Peter could claim that promise for his day, how much more can we claim it for our day? And how much closer the coming of the Lord must be? And of course, over a century has passed since that time. The Lord hasn't come back, but we do feel that His coming is drawing closer and closer. And so we're going to talk about that today. Now, I've given you a handout, which I won't be able to cover everything, but at least that will help organize our lesson here tonight. And I have 7 Roman numeral points, and those are the 7 things I want to emphasize tonight. So I'll try to at least give you some information about each one of those categories. But I'll start with Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3. This occurs shortly before the crucifixion of Jesus. His disciples had this interesting conversation with Jesus, and Jesus gave some teaching in Matthew 24:3. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, "Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" And so this is what we're talking about. Jesus had just told them, they were there in Jerusalem at the temple complex and marveling at the magnificent structure of the temple. And so Jesus said, well, there's coming a time where one stone's not going to be left on the other. Well, that shocked them. And so they said, well, when is this going to happen? And what's the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? Now, probably from the first century Jewish perspective, they saw all those 3 things as happening right together, because there was no way they could imagine this is God's holy temple. If it's going to be destroyed, that's going to be the end of the world. So Jesus didn't try to explain to them, well, that first thing is going to come in a few years, and then there's going to be a long time where the Gentiles are coming in, and I'm going to establish a church of Jews and Gentiles, and then I will come back. And then after I come back, there's going to be some events, and eventually the last judgment. He did not try to distinguish those 3 things. So when we try from our vantage point 2,000 years later, of course, we know the temple of Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70. Christ's words literally came to pass. If you go to Jerusalem today, you will see the western wall, which is not of the temple itself, but of the temple grounds. The actual temple buildings completely destroyed, and there's a Muslim mosque on there, the Mosque of Omar. And so Jesus' words literally came true in AD 70 of the first part of that. So we're standing in the middle saying, well, there are 3 questions. The disciples looking forward, they just saw all of it blurring together in the end, the far distant future. But we are in the middle saying, wait a minute, part of that was fulfilled 2,000 years ago. So where are we now? And so Jesus began to give some signs. And if you read the rest of Matthew 24, I've listed some of these signs. For the sake of time, we'll try to expedite this. But he said there are false Christs, there will be wars, rumors of wars, famine, pestilence, earthquakes, persecution, false prophets falling away, the universal preaching of the gospel, the tribulation, a great time of great tribulation. People would be preoccupied with worldly pleasures. There would be signs in the heavens, sun, moon, and stars. And that could be metaphorical or symbolic language of a shaking of the nations, perplexity of nations, people's hearts failing for fear, and restoration of Jerusalem to Jewish rule. Now, when you read all this, this kind of sounds like today's headlines, doesn't it? And so that makes us think we are living in the end time. Now, if you also look at some other places, Paul's teaching, he said there will be a great falling away from truth, revelation of the man of sin, false doctrine, perilous times, erosion of the home, ethics, morals, authority, religion. 2 Timothy 3, and much of that sounds very familiar today. And if you read through all of this, I read one of the things there was that the restoration of Jerusalem to Jewish rule. Now, for us, that's commonplace. But if you think about it, the city of Jerusalem was destroyed by the Roman armies in AD 70. The city was desolate. There was another revolt in the 2nd century by Jews, and the entire nation was wiped out, and the Jews are forcibly resettled all across the Roman Empire. And so throughout the last 2,000 years, Jews have been scattered throughout the world, and to a great extent all throughout Europe and the Middle East. But in 1948, Israel became a nation again, and the Jews became in control of half the city of Jerusalem. In 1967, the Six-Day War, the Arab nations tried to destroy them. Israel fought back and won and conquered the entire city of Jerusalem. So from 1948, there's been a Jewish nation after almost 2,000 years of no nation. As of 1967, the Jews have been in control of their own city, Jerusalem, for the first time in almost 2,000 years. There is no other nation in history that has been destroyed that's come back like that. In fact, there is no other nation in history that from ancient times that still retains its same culture, its same religion, its same language. Now, you can find other ancient language countries like Greece, like Rome, like Egypt, but they don't have their ancient religions. And they don't have, in the case of Egypt, they don't have their ancient language. It's a different group of people. Arabs have come in and displaced the population at the time of Pharaoh. It's a completely different language, completely different religion. There is no other nation from 2,000 years ago that even has survived with its same national identity. As I said, language, religion, and so forth, much less come back from extinction. So the existence of the nation of Israel is totally contrary to all other precedent in human history. That alone should be a wake-up sign. Something amazing is happening in these last days. Now, if you study, and I'll mention this a little bit later, in the book of Revelation, you see the development of a world economic system, a world political system. And it talks about how the whole world will be controlled through economic means. The whole world will be tracked, that everyone will have to take a number. Well, Christian people have always taught about this, but only in recent years can we see the technology where it will literally come to pass. So 100 years ago, people were teaching on this, they believed it, but they could not tell you how this could come to pass. For example, there's a prophecy in Revelation that the whole world would see the beast, this evil ruler and his false prophet. Well, we literally have the technology through video, satellite, TV. How many people saw Princess Diana's funeral? It was like 1/3 of the world's population. It was, a couple billion people, I think. So we literally have the technology and the culture, and of course through the internet, literally everyone could see a video clip or a streaming feed. We have the technology. With computer technology, every person, 7 billion people, could be tracked. And every financial transaction, if you get rid of cash, every financial transaction could be tracked. So it's not something that could happen 100 years from now. It could literally be implemented with our current technology. That could have never been said before in human history. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, you could not have said with existing technology, we see how this could actually be fulfilled. So we are living in a different day. Now, we believe the Lord is coming back. And when is he going to come back? Well, Mark chapter 13 describes this same teaching of Jesus. And I'll just read a few verses from there. And I put Mark 13:33, but actually I probably should have started at 32. So let me do that and just read a few verses of Scripture here. Mark chapter 13, and I'll begin at verse 32. Jesus says, "For the Son of Man, but of that day and of that hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father. Take ye heed, watch and pray, for ye know not when the time is. For the Son of Man is as a man taking a far journey, who left his house, gave authority to his servants, to every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch. Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh, at even, or at midnight, or at the cock crowing, or in the morning, lest coming suddenly he find you sleeping. And what I say, unto you, I say unto all, watch." Well, there's a direct warning for us. Now, several things we see. No one knows the time when the Lord's coming back. He said, not even the Son. And some have questioned that. You know, if you had two co-equal persons in the Godhead, how could one be smarter than the other? But that's not what he's talking about. He's saying, he's trying to underscore this. He says, even I as a man would not know. The only way I would know is by the mind of God, which of course he had the mind of God. But he was trying to underscore, no human being can know. Even I could not know just as a human being. The only way I would know is by the Spirit of God within me. And so he's underscoring. So if anybody tells you they know when the Lord's coming back, they don't. There were, years ago, some of you remember, there was it 1987? This little booklet, 88 reasons why the Lord was going to come in 1988. And it says no man knows the day or the hour, so the way he got around that was saying, well, it's a 3-day time period. You don't know the day, but you can know the 3 days. Well, that's a quibble in Scripture, I think. But I said, even that's false, because he was saying no one can know the 24-hour period, but you can know the 72-hour period. And so he marked it down. I said, well, you're false, because it couldn't be the third day, because you would live through the first 2 days and everybody would know it has to be the third day. So that would violate your statement. So you know it can't be the third day. It has to be one of the first 2 days. So if you live through the first day, everybody knows it's the second day. So it can't be the second day. That means it has to be the first day. But if it has to be the first day, that violates the rule. So I said, you're wrong. And sure enough, he didn't come. The Lord did come in 88. So we all thought about doing 89 reasons why the Lord would come in 89. The 89th reason being because he didn't come in 88. But we decided not to publish that book. Later, we found out the guy that wrote that book didn't even go to church. He didn't feel that was important. So, anyway, if somebody tells you they know when the Lord is coming, you can just ignore them, okay? Because no one knows. But there are signs, and these signs are prevalent in our day. But notice now, the nature of these signs is not just absolute on or off. Wars, rumors of wars, famines, earthquakes, pestilence. Well, that's been throughout human history. But I think the significance is they're increasing. So it's like a crescendo. It's getting louder and louder and louder and louder. So when is it loud enough that this is when the Lord comes? So people at different ages have said, wow, look at the signs. They're increasing. Compared to 50 years ago, they're greater. So it's got to be coming now. And then 50 years later, we say, well, you know, it's a lot more than it was 50 years ago. Surely the Lord's got to come now. But the nature of it, you don't know how much the Lord considers the prevalences of signs. So it still preserves the idea. No one knows the time. But when you look at the signs, you can see surely the Lord must be coming soon. And I do see something different about our generation. As I mentioned before, for the first time in history, we actually can see how every prophecy could be fulfilled. Another thing that I don't know how you quantify it, but remember the story, the Tower of Babel, when God told the people to disperse and multiply and fill the earth, and they said, no, we're going to build a tower to heaven, make our name for ourselves. We're going to be like God. We're going to ascend to heaven. Maybe they thought they could avoid judgment like the flood if they build a tower big enough. And the Lord said, you know what? They're going to fulfill what they have planned. If I don't come down and confound them, they are going to accomplish these things contrary to my will. And so he brought judgment. Well, in our day, something is happening with our science and technology and our naturalistic and even atheistic views. We're starting to tamper with life itself. Things that belong only to God. Talking about designer babies, talking about changing human nature, talking about implanting devices in people's brains to improve their ability, talking about genetic engineering where parents can pick and choose what kind of child they want, talking about changing your gender or your sex to be different than what God created you to be, and then changing society to match whatever you want. At some point, we're tampering with God's creative power. God is the one who created life. God is the one who created male and female. God is the one who instituted marriage. So there's always been sin in the human race. But what I see different now is we have enough technology and we've gathered together enough to say, we're going to change what God instituted in Genesis chapter 1. We're going to change what marriage means. We're going to change what humanity means. We're going to change what male means. We're going to change what female means. How far is God going to let the human race usurp his prerogatives before he says, enough is enough? If I let them go any further, they're going to totally destroy my plan for the human race. I think we're getting in that arena. So the nature of the signs is you can't pinpoint when it's going to happen. But because they're continuing to increase, that gives you an intensity that surely his coming must be drawing nearer and nearer. I do believe that saints of every age look for the Lord to come. And I'll read you in a minute. Paul even thought the Lord could come in his day. So was Paul wrong? Were the Pentecostals of the early 20th century wrong? No. I think the Lord wanted them to feel. No one knows. He could come in our day. That's part of what helps us keep looking to heaven as our destiny. In other words, we realize ultimately our problems are not going to be solved by politics or economics or business or culture. We're looking for the coming of the Lord. And so it's not wrong to say we think the Lord is coming in our day or the Lord could come. And of course, we must be ready at all times. And certainly, if the Lord doesn't come before we die, we will face the Lord in death. And so we must be ready for his coming. So it's God's will for the church of every age to look for the coming of the Lord. It's God's will for the church and the individuals of every age to be prepared for his coming one way or the other. And I will say this, as far as I can tell, there is no sign, no unfulfilled sign that would prevent the Lord from coming. In other words, if you read all the passages I've given you and others beside, I don't think there's anything you can say, oh, well, the Lord can't come for another 10 years or 20 years or whatever because this has not been fulfilled. There's nothing that would prevent the Lord from coming back.